This is So Fail, So Good, the podcast that changes the way we talk about failure from women who've lived through it and learned. Today on the show, we have Robyn Frank. Robyn is the founder and CEO of Thumbs Cookies, the most addictive cookies you will ever eat. Where to begin with my sweet friend Robyn? Since meeting Robyn, she has brought a huge extra dose of joy into my life. She is so passionate about what she does, and she truly makes anyone in her orbit feel incredibly special to be part of it. Today, we hear about her journey from aspiring actress to tiny cookie queen, with a few fun stops along the way, like her time being a hot dogger, traveling cross-country in a giant Wienermobile. Robyn's story is filled with plenty of moments where a lot of people would have given up. You can feel Robyn's positive spirit and confidence in our interview, even in her most difficult moments. On to the show. Okay, Robyn. Let's start from the beginning.
Okay.
So what was your first job? First ever paycheck you got?
My first ever job was actually working at Dumb Brothers
Oh, very
in
nice.
Minnetonka. I had to scoop tuna out of cans and put a ton of mayonnaise.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, it was super disgusting. My forearm was covered in mayonnaise. But I got a paycheck for that.
First paycheck.
Yeah.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
And
In
you
high
grew
school.
up in Minnesota.
Yes.
High school here.
Yes.
And then college. Where did you go to college? What happened next?
I went to Indiana University, which a lot of people don't know because I rarely talk about that. But yeah.
And what did you study there?
Well, I was supposed to study theater, but that only lasted for a week. And I got super intimidated, so I ended up studying journalism. Yeah, that was my major.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So after school, you got quite the gig, your first job out of college. And I would
Yes.
say it's probably the best job title I've ever heard of, called a hot dogger.
Yes.
Right? Am I getting that right?
Yeah, that's the official name.
And,
Dogger.
and so you were driving around the Wienermobile,
Mm-hmm.
with
The Oscar Mayer Wienermobile. You got to say the whole title.
the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile.
No rip-offs. The original.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So how did this adventure come about? How'd you even think to apply for this job? How'd you even know it was a job?
Good question. You're good at this. Good question. So I never would have thought of it. Who thinks about driving around a hot dog? I didn't know it was a job. And I was trying to be all real, applying for real jobs. And then actually there was this girl who was a sister of my friend, and she was a hot dogger. And they came to Indiana with the Wienermobile. They came to where we lived. And I don't know why we were all hanging out. And after the weekend of her being there and us driving around in the hot dog, for fun, she was like, I think you'd be really good at this. And I was like, I don't even know what that means. Is that a compliment? But she was like, I think you'd be great. And I would recommend you if you want. And I was just like, well, I'm getting a real job. What are you talking about? But then the more I looked into it, I was like, wait, you get to drive around in a hot dog and wave to people and make them smile and give them wiener whistles, go to some grocery stores, and only 12 people get to do it. I was like, yeah, okay.
What?
I know.
That sounds like a dream.
It was. Well, so she kind of threw my name in the hat because apparently what they said statistically is 2,000 people apply for it, but they pick 12 people to do it. So it's this thing, which of course I was down for the
Competition.
challenge.
Right.
I'm okay. And my mom's maiden name is Weiner, but everyone said Wiener. And my last name is Frank. So everyone said I went from a Wiener to a Frank. So that's what I said in one of my interviews, which I think is why I got the job.
Oh, I love that.
But yeah, I don't even think I have told you this before, but I had made this arts and crafts project. Did I tell you this?
I don't think so.
It was a condiment holder that I found at the grocery store, and it was shaped like a hot dog, and the middle of it opened if you pressed a button. So the actual wiener part opened. I could say wiener on this, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I put my resume in there, and then I painted my name on the side of it. You know how Oscar Mayer has its logo? So I put Robyn Frank in the Oscar Mayer thing, with paint pens, which I was not very crafty. And then I made this weird cardboard, they might have been totally freaked out when they got this in the mail. This girl is psycho. But it was this cardboard cutout thing of my whole life story. And that was trailing behind. It was tied with ribbon. And that was what I sent. But I got an interview.
I mean, you're hired right from there. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then what happens? You get the interview.
I got the interview. It was 3 different interview points. So I
Okay.
got the opening interview. They called me, and then I passed that test somehow. And then they called me to come to Madison. That might have been the 3rd round, but eventually you get to Madison, and it's like an
The big
audition. It's like
leagues.
So you go to Madison, Wisconsin. That's where shit goes down.
Okay.
And they were like, you literally are like in this crazy, like there are all these people in there, and it's like an audition. You're in like a waiting room with all these people, and you're like sizing everyone up, and you're like, could that person be a hot dog driver? Is that person going to be a hot dog driver? It's kind of crazy. And it's your first real interview, because like this was when I was a senior in college, and I'm like, man, I can't believe this is what I'm interviewing to do. And I can't believe how like I'm sweating because I'm in this waiting room. So eventually they like pass you around to like 7 different people that work for Oscar Mayer. So you go into these rooms and you have separate interviews with people. And so that was round 2. And then the 3rd round is the ultimate, which is Russ Whitaker, if he's listening.
I hope he is.
Russ was the big boss, and he was very quiet and very large and very intimidating. And he was the final interview. And so...
And you got the job.
I said the wiener to Frank thing, and he laughed. And I think that's what happened, because I never really saw him laugh after that, like even the whole year after. But I think that's how I cut the mustard. Yeah.
And so you got assigned, I think you said, to the West Coast, correct? And so you're driving around.
West Coast wiener.
You're a West Coast wiener. You're driving around the country, which sounds, again, beautiful, amazing, right out of college. And at this point, do you feel like you have a sense of... I mean, I guess at first you're probably just enjoying it and trying to take each day. But after a while, are you thinking, okay, what's next? And what do I want to do? Like, what's next?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the whole thing. So it's a year long that you do this. And I had never really like been out to the West Coast. So it was kind of like amazing, like to see the West Coast through the eyes of this giant hot dog. I mean, it was pretty crazy. And you're with one other person, so you're getting to know them really well. But there's a lot of action, because you're like, going to grocery store parking lots and really fun things like the Super Bowl. But you also have a lot of downtime, especially because I was on the West Coast. So like we would be going to 2 different locations, but there'd be an 8-hour drive in between.
Sure.
So you're like in a hot dog, driving up Mount Shasta, like listening to whatever you and your partner have agreed to listen to. We did a lot of John Denver, a lot of like that sunny mountain, smoky mountain thing. I don't know. But you're like driving along, and you've talked about everything you can talk about with this person, because you spend hours with them, and you have a lot of time to think and reflect, about what you want to do. And you're also meeting so many different people doing so many different things. So it really is kind of an awesome way to like really think about what's next. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I remember you telling me about a specific stop you had that was in Hollywood. And you're in the Hollywood, you actually end up on a lot. And at this point, I mean, acting is sort of there, right? You're thinking about it. What was that moment like? And I know you just mentioned you kind of get to see a lot of people in their element doing things they're passionate about. What was that like when you got on that Hollywood lot?
Well, I think I had always wanted to be an actress. And I used to say it a lot before college. Then when I got to college and I like saw the theater department people, I got super scared off. So it was like one of those lingering things that I always wanted to pursue. But something about driving the hot dog, and like, I don't know, there was something about the experience that just was kind of giving me some courage, I was like feeling kind of like, okay, like I got this job that was hard to get.
Sure.
And also seeing all these people that were unhappy in certain jobs. And seeing people that really went for it in their life, I was like, well, what if I really did just put it out there? Like, I'm 22 years old. What if I actually say, like, I want to be an actress? So I think we were in Hollywood a lot, and we were always around this lot. It was like ABC. They would like ask us to come do stuff. And I think I finally had the guts to be like, I want to be an actress, which saying it even now, like a little bit of me just like, ooh, cringes inside. But also it was like exciting. And there was this guy, he worked on the lot, and he really liked us. He loved the Wienermobile. And he was like, I'm going to get you like a meeting with a big person.
Wow.
And so he hooked me up with this big time director. And I got a meeting with him. Like this guy
While you're in the Wiener.
Yeah, so we
Wow.
would stay, because we would stay in hotels all over the West Coast. So we were stationed in LA for a while, for like a month. So we were just, going to grocery stores, but looking for things to do. And so it was during this time. And so I met this big director, and it was like a really big deal. Like I still can't believe I met with him. And
Is this your first meeting?
this was our first, there was one meeting
Okay.
only.
Tell me about the meeting.
So I don't know. I was like, well, what am I going to say? What am I going to do? So I go in there, and it was a pretty short meeting. He pretty much was like, how old are you? And I was like, I'm 22. And he's like, no. And the other thing is I have a scar on my face. And I believe he brought that up. He was like, is that a scar? And I said, yes. And he's like, listen, you're too old, and you have that mark on your face. And I remember him saying, I just was auditioning this 17-year-old the other day. And he said her name. He's like, she's going to be a star, but even she's old to start. So he's like, I would think about what other things you can do. And then he was the one, I think, who introduced me to Cameron Manheim. He's like, I want you to meet someone. And I don't know why he connected with her. She was like a considered plus size actress at the time, and one of the only ones. He's like, I want you to talk to her. She had kind of a rough road. Maybe it would be inspirational for you to talk to her, which I know I didn't even bring up in the other conversation we had. So that was like his thing that he did for me, but he pretty much told me, like, don't even try. Like, you're up against ridiculous odds. You're not castable. You're too old. You have a mark on your face. Like, you should just turn around and go home. But anyways,
well, oh my,
it was really uplifting.
That sounds like deep rejection. I mean,
deep rejection.
And it's your first swing, right? It's like your first moment to kind of feel vulnerable and put it out there. I want to be an actress. You had the courage to go to that meeting. A lot of people would have been very scared.
Yeah.
What did it feel like when you left that room?
Oh, I felt so stupid. I felt so dumb. But then I was like, I don't know, something about having that job really put things in perspective. And I was like, okay, that's one person's opinion. I probably cried. I probably called my mom. But then I was like, okay, like, that's not going to stop me from going on the journey. It's one guy. And like, yeah, he's kind of a big deal, but I'm just going to like see what's next. And I did end up meeting Cameron Manheim, and she was very cool. And she did tell me she had a very tough road. And I was like, okay, well, if this woman can do it, like maybe I can do it. And there's like a lot of older ladies that are successful, like whatever.
And
so
I love that old is 22 in this scenario, but wow.
I know it was brutal, right?
That's
and
harsh.
I never wanted to go to college. I really wanted to. I thought about this acting thing like when I was 17, and my parents really insisted on me going to college. And then I was like, after that conversation with him, I was like, damn it. I should have just started when I was 17. But yeah, apparently 22 is too old.
So bringing up even fears of making the wrong choices, right? Did I already lead myself down the wrong path? And
totally,
one person made that all those thoughts come up, which is difficult.
And he was a white man at the time, so he really like knew everything, like
right.
That meeting was like, I reflect back on that, and I'm like, now today we're taught to think so differently about things. Like there's so many more possibilities, and like that one guy is not the be all end all of everything in all of our minds, because now there's so many different people making things happen. But at the time, that was the power.
Yeah.
So that was pretty brutal to hear. But then hearing from Cameron Manheim, who was a woman and who had beat a lot of odds, was kind of offset it a little, I think. So I was back on. I was like, all right.
So she gave you some encouraging advice.
Yeah.
And at this point, I mean, let's just fast forward. The Wienermobile, your job, it ends. I'm sure that feels kind of scary too, because that was probably so much fun. And now what do you move back home, right? Tell me about that transition. You're done with the Wienermobile, and you have to move back to Minnesota.
Yeah.
Back to reality.
That was rough. That was a rough moment. I remember, because I was traveling all over, felt like a rock star. Everyone wants to talk to you because you drive the Wienermobile. And then I literally moved back into my childhood room because I didn't really have a plan. Like even after all the thinking, going up Mount Shasta with John Denver in the background, I still didn't really have a plan. even though I had this lingering thought of like, this is what I want to pursue. So I went home and I was, in my childhood bedroom with like my yellow gingham wallpaper and all of like the things I had put up on the wall about where I was going to travel and what I was going to do. And I felt like, I was like, oh no, like I peaked at the Wienermobile and now I'm back in this place. And I like, it was kind of a sad moment in my life, to be honest. It was like coming off of a major high.
Yeah. I can, and into a feeling of just lost.
Yes.
How did you know what to even, I mean, I know you wanted to do acting, but you're back in Minnesota. So how did you think like, well, I can still act here? Or did you know you wanted to move?
Yeah, no. Okay. So I remember feeling like, kind of, first of all, I didn't want to answer any more wiener questions. I was like, I'm done with that. Everyone wanted to ask me. I was like, that's done. It's a chat like wrapped up. I like made a promise to myself. I'm like, I'm not going to talk anything wiener for like a year. Like I'm not answering any of the questions. Like that was that. This is now.
No wiener talk.
No wiener talk. I'm done. But yeah, then I remember I started to like tell people slowly about this acting thing. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm in Minnesota. I don't know what I'm going to do next. I should look for an acting class. So that's what I did. I looked for an acting class and I went to Karen's Modeling International or whatever. I don't know what led me there. I don't even know if that's still like a thing, but it was a thing. And I called them up. I remember I was like on 55 with my mom and we were talking about this. I remember I had a cell phone. Yeah, I had a cell phone because it was 2004.
Sure.
And I called them and they were like, oh, so amazing that you called because we have this new teacher in town. He studied with Sanford Meisner. I have no idea who that is, but she is selling me hardcore on this new teacher that came from New York. He's in town. He has an opening and I think you should do it. And I'm like, oh, this is meant to be. It's a sign. Yeah. Right. Amazing. I have no idea what she's talking about, but it sounds very exciting. So I'm like, yes, I'll take it. I am in.
Sign me up.
Sign me up. So do you want to hear? I don't know.
So you joined this acting class. Yeah. It's a once a week thing. Do you have a job?
Well,
did you also get a job while you were here?
Before I got to, okay. So I went and I met Lev Mailer, who was like this, he's still alive. He's like in his 80s. He's Brooklyn, New York, like had a hairpiece. I don't think he's going to listen to this, but he was very hardcore and strict. And I remember I was like a couple minutes late and he was like, you wasted my time. He was like one of those, like you need to be 15 minutes early.
He's the teacher.
Got it. Lev Mailer, the teacher. And then he later liked me because I like went up and did an exercise and he liked me. And then he said, I have this private class and you can come observe it for a month. And if it's a fit, if I like you, then you can stay. So then, yeah.
So there's that competitive nature probably in you saying, oh yeah, I'm going to get into that class. Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. And so you are in Minnesota for now, how long? Like is it a couple of years that you're taking these acting classes and sort of?
No, it was only like a year and a half because what happened was I got into the class and he accepted me. And it was actually like it was a scene study class. So you would like memorize monologues or do scenes with people. And I was like, that wasn't bad. I was feeling good. I was like, okay, like people are liking me in the class. They want to do scenes with me. I'm like, okay, like I think I got this. But Lev would always talk about this school called the Neighborhood Playhouse in New York that he studied at with Sanford Meisner, who is now dead, but was kind of like the king of method acting. Okay. Like he had his own technique called Meisner. And so that's what we learned, and that's what Lev taught and everything. So I was like sitting there in that Tuesday night class, and I didn't have a whole lot of other stuff going on. I was working at Anthropology. I was living in my childhood bedroom. Like life was kind of bleak. And I was like, I got to get out of here. I am going to go to the source. I'm going to go to New York. I'm going to go to the Neighborhood Playhouse. That's what I'm going to do. It was like a light bulb moment. I was like, my life is just going to start.
Yes.
So yeah, that's what I decided.
Okay, so you apply to the school. I would guess you have to apply.
I applied to the school and I got an interview. And I think you had to prepare a monologue. So I was like really kind of freaked out about that. But yeah, the main audition was like an interview with the head of the school. Okay. So I went and I told 2 other girls in my class that I was doing this, which is like a whole other story because they ended up coming with me. But Mr. Baldrich was his name. And he's like, God knows how old. Like I walk into the school and it's dilapidated. I mean, it's like you could feel the ghosts of Sandford Meisner and like every other, like Diane Keaton went there, Dylan McDermott. Like there were some interesting people that passed through there. And all of their pictures were on the wall. And it's like just like out of like the movie Fame or something. Like, you know, like you walk in and it's like these old headshots, black and white. And like it smells kind of like old people, but like it also feels like real shit is going down in here. You know what I mean? And like there's fluorescent lights and then lights out. And like, I mean, yeah. And so you walk up this like creaky, it's like an old building on the Upper East Side. You walk up this creaky staircase and it's like, Mr. Baldrige will see you in 10 minutes. Because, like, I think her name was Mrs. Luce, who was also like 90 years old. It was like his admin. You don't want to hear all this. But anyway.
My gosh.
Yeah. So, anyways, yeah. So
you get in the interview.
Get in the interview.
Do your monologue.
Scared shitless. Because I'm like, I got to do the monologue. Doesn't even ask me to do the monologue. Just talks to me.
Oh.
Just to chat. And I think like 2 weeks later, I got a letter saying that I got in. And I also auditioned at other places.
Okay.
But I don't think I got into the other places. But I did get in there.
So it's happening. The plan that you'd set out, it sounds like, you know, this is my new future.
Yes.
I'm moving to New York.
Yep.
And things are going to start happening for me.
Yes. And I told my 2 other friends in my little scene study class, and they were like, we're coming too, which was amazing. Crazy. So they did the same thing. I don't know how we all got in. They all talked to Mr. B, the whole Mr. B. And we were literally, it was like a sitcom. We're like, okay, we're getting a U-Haul and we're taking our shit and we're going to New York City. 3 broads, 3 brunette. We were brunettes set out like to New York City. And we all were old, by the way, because we were all like old according to
acting
that
old,
dude.
Sure,
yeah.
According to
we were acting old because we were all in our mid-20s at that point.
That sounds like a movie.
It was,
yeah. So you all get there, and it was the neighborhood playhouse?
Yeah, the neighborhood playhouse.
Okay,
yeah.
so you all get in. It seems like everything's really happening. I'm guessing you all got an apartment together?
We all got an apartment in Brooklyn together, the 3 of us, which was super fun.
The adventure starts.
Yes.
Tell me about like day to day there. What is it? Are you also working? Does it take up the whole day? Like, what's it like?
Yeah, it was kind of like acting boot camp. It was super intense. Like we were all so excited. And then there were 3 classes, so they split us all up. And it was literally you walk in 9 o'clock in the morning, and it's these very intimidating. It was these 3 men that were the teachers, and they basically like it was like boot camp in the sense that they like tore you down.
Sure.
Like you would get up in front of this class of like 20 some people, and you would do like these acting exercises of like listening and repeating. It was so weird, but they would basically evaluate you doing this, and you would feel like that they would tear you down. They'd be like, okay, you're done. No, you weren't even doing it. You weren't even listening. You weren't even talking to each other. Sit down. It was like that. It was like out of a movie, and you're like sitting there like, oh my God, like they're tearing you apart and wearing you down. And then sometimes you would do something right and they would build you back up. But it was very emotionally intense, and it's 9 to 5. So you're with these 20 some people for like hours doing these weird acting exercises.
At any point during your time there, it was how long?
So the first year, you basically is a whole long audition to get into the second year.
Okay.
And 2 of us got into the second year of my 3 girlfriends. And so it was a 2-year program overall.
And so over those 2 years, was there any points where you were like, I can't do this anymore? This is like a moment where maybe a teacher did tear you down and you're sitting there thinking, what am I doing here? What is this all worth? What's it for? Or was that just a drive inside of you that was like, this is all part of it and I just have to get through this?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, actually, I think I felt like very supported there. I felt like the teachers really liked me and the other students liked me. And I felt like it was actually a very big confidence builder. I was like doing well in my little bubble at the neighborhood playhouse. I felt like I really got it. I got the technique. I felt like I was like,
Like, this is happening.
This is right. I was like, it was like a moment of like feeling in the pocket. I was like, I was meant to do this. I can listen and answer because that's what they tell you it is. And Like sometimes I could make people laugh. I could cry up there. I could be really vulnerable. I was like, yeah, this is where I'm supposed to be. Okay. Like I was actually feeling really good after school.
And so you graduate probably on a high. Those 2
Yes.
years later,
Yeah.
feeling like, okay, now I'm ready. I feel prepared. I'm good at this.
And then shit got real.
So what, talk me through that? Like, what is it like once you've, I mean, do you have an agent? Like, what's next?
No, I never had one, which I still feel like that was a brutal time. So basically, like, you get out of the neighborhood playhouse, you're feeling pretty good. Some people didn't, like, they really tore some people down, but I don't know. I got out of there and felt really good. And then we had a showcase at the end of the neighborhood of the playhouse. So like these agents come and, you know, like they're from all these big networks, and basically they determine like, okay, who do I want to take on as a client? Sure. And I think it was only dudes that were called. And then maybe like the hottest girl in the class was also called. And that was like a big wake up call, because it was like, yeah, we want hot girls and we want dudes, because basically you learn there are like quadruple the amount of women trying to be actresses than men. So like working as a man seemed much more likely, statistically speaking. So that was like the first check of reality. I remember that showcase, because like I felt pretty good, like as as an actress, but then it was like, oh yeah, it's actually 5% talent and 95% everything else, how you look and how aggressive you are. And that was like very apparent even after that one showcase. And then it just got like every day after that graduation got harder and harder, because reality set in deeper and deeper.
And so now you are out there, you get your headshots, you are pursuing auditions, and do you get a job? Like, how do you support yourself while pursuing acting, and what does that even look like every day?
I got a barista job, which I was very excited about. It was a graduate of the Playhouse got me a job. So I was making coffee, which apparently I was really bad at making coffee, but good at making sandwiches. And literally, like, you spend your day, like, you wake up and at that time, there was like one website where you could put your headshot and put your resume and hope that someone in the universe calls you because you're the right person for the audition, which PS never fucking happened. But you do that because you feel like, okay, that's something. And then there was like a little publication you would look through that would have, because it sounds so old school, but you'd look through this like classifieds of like parts, you know, and you'd submit yourself for that. And there were crazy things people would tell you to do, like, okay, go send out 200 resumes a day.
Oh, wow.
Right? Like that was what we were talking about here. You got to get your reel, you have to get your headshots. And PS, everything costs a lot of money, like especially for like a barista in New York City. They're like, yeah, headshots are $800. But if you want to work, you've got to get really good ones, you know, and you get caught up in all of this. Like, you don't know what's real and what's not. That's the thing. Like, you don't know who to believe. You don't know how people get work. It seems so random. But you're like, okay, if I send out enough resumes, if I talk to enough casting directors, if I look through all the classifieds, if I go on the website, if I do all these things, something is bound to happen. And then it doesn't, and you're like, oh my God.
So did you can you tell me about an audition you had that maybe was unsuccessful and you were sitting there like...
Oh, most of them, I think, were unsuccessful. I mean, no, there were some successful ones, but I mean, just first of all, you walk into a room and there are 10 people that look like you. So you're looking at everybody, and the worst is when they would all know each other, because they'd be like, oh my God, how are you? Like, there are a million things that can make you feel offset and make you feel like you're already so nervous. You're like the worst version of yourself when you go to audition, you know, and you walk in and you try to like be confident and tell them an anecdote or like, I don't know, do anything to stand out. And then they wouldn't even look up at you. They would just not even look up. They'd be like, okay, what are you doing today? What's your monologue? Oh. Okay, go. And in the middle of it, they would say, thank you. Thanks, Miss Frank.
Oh my God.
We'll call you. I mean, it's literally like that. It's so brutal. You're just like, you just feel, and you don't want to tell anyone you're auditioning for anything, because some people think you're going to get a part. So you like, don't tell anybody where you're going for like an hour, you know, I couldn't even talk about it, but I did have some good auditions too. I shouldn't just talk about the really brutal ones. There were good ones too.
But the support, so it sounds like you don't really have much support because you aren't telling anybody that you're going through this audition, or today, did you get the part, did you not? What was it like? Instead, it sort of just seems like you're kind of all dealing with that internally.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm guessing, like, what sort of feelings, like self-doubt, you're in that room, there are 10 people that look like you, and then you don't get the job.
Yeah.
What does that feel like?
It's a constant question of, like, how do I change myself to be what they want? How do I look better? How do I look thinner? How do I be sexier? How do I just not be a shitty actor? I mean, it's like all the things. And you have so much time. That's like the real curse of an actor's life, I think, is time. You have a lot of time to think about what's wrong with you. And really, now that I've had time to look back on it, you just aren't in control of anything at all. Like, you are in control of nothing. But that's how, I mean, I don't know if you want to know about this now, but like, that's why I was like, we have to do something about this. We have to start writing our own. We have to like make our own shit. Yeah. Is basically what I decided. I was like, I'm done with this, because I was just, also the parts I was getting, or the parts I was reading for, were all like hoes and prostitutes and then I was always like pregnant, but something wasn't working out. Those were like all the roles I was going out for. And I don't know. It was like, it was never just like some smart lady, normal person. It was always just, I don't know, over-sexualized parts and a lot of auditions with creepy dudes. That was a real thing. Like, you go into an audition, the director would actually talk to you. You'd think it was something promising. And then the next thing you know, he's like, meet me at this romantic dinner at 7:00 tomorrow and we'll discuss it. It was like shit like that, that was really... And
you're going to go because you get a callback. It's your callback. And you're thinking, this could be my big break. And maybe he just wants to get to know my acting style more. Maybe he wants to, wow.
I know. And I feel so lame even talking, like even saying that, because it's crazy that I even did that. But I mean, that's really how you feel. You feel some kind of desperate, because you've put it out there to everybody that you want to do this. So you kind of, like, for me, I was like, I've got to do everything it takes to make it happen. And so there are these things you do. I mean, I didn't actually sleep with anyone to get a part. I feel like I should just say that, because it sounds like I was doing that, but I never was able to do that. And sometimes, like, damn, I wish I could just do that, but I never actually did that. But I think, you find yourself going out on these, you internally, you're like, I should not be having dinner with this man. Like, this is definitely uncomfortable, but you do it because you're like, well, maybe there's gold at the end of this pot, like, you just do things like that because you're just so desperate to make something happen that you've told other people you're going to do. There was a lot of that I had thought about.
And telling other people, I feel like I can relate to that a lot too. Once I've put something out there, it feels, even if maybe you kind of are realizing as you're going along, well, this isn't working. A lot of the times, the biggest thing holding you back from making that call can be other people's judgments, because you have put yourself out on a limb. You have put something out there saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to be this, I'm going to have this business. Totally. And how do you silence those thoughts too?
Oh, yeah. I mean, a big thing for me too was, so I lived in New York, and every time I knew I had to go home to Minnesota, I was very aware of like, well, what am I going to do and what am I going to say? Like, when I go to parties or when I meet up with my family, they're going to want a soundbite of what my life is. So I have to have something, like, what's the audition I'm going to talk about? Or like, what's the progress report I'm going to give them? And there was a lot of pressure inside of, on me that I put on myself regarding that. Like, I couldn't go home and just be like, it's not working. That was just not an option. So I had to come up with some funny story I was going to tell. And I got really good at that. Like, I got really good at telling a story about my life there and what I was up to. And I always had like a tidbit. I always had just enough to like make people feel like I was actually doing it, But inside I was like, I'm fooling people. Like, I am not doing this. Like, I am failing at this every day. but I don't know.
So you ultimately, like you were saying, you were done with all these auditions. You were thinking, okay, I just need to start making my own stuff. We need to start creating.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that led to Sweeter Theater.
Yes, Sweeter Theater, which I like never even talk about now.
It's so amazing. Why don't you just tell me where that idea came from? Why did you want to start your own theater company?
Well, when you realize that you're a dime a dozen, you're totally not in control of anything. And you kind of start to see that people are getting parts because they're writing their own stuff or they're making their own stuff. So if you make your own things, then if you're creating something and putting it out there, then people either, have to see it or they buy tickets to see it, or you just have a more likelihood of standing out, really. And I was starting to put that together. I was like, okay, because we started Sweeter Theater in 2007 and I graduated from the Playhouse in 2006. So it was really kind of a year of drifting around, trying to figure out how to like land these parts and going out to creepy dinners. And then I was like, okay, like there must be something else I can do. And I remember saying to my best friend, I think we should make our own work. And so we kind of started to talk about that, and we started talking to some of my other classmates that graduated about that too. So that was the first thing. We did a little play with two other guys we graduated with. And we did it at our old theater at the neighborhood Playhouse. And people came and I think they bought tickets. And it was like, and suddenly it was like everyone that we graduated with and other people were kind of looking at us like, oh, they're doing something. They're making their own work. And it was an okay play. It was fine, but it was kind of also a shit show because we were there was no real leader in it. And in that process, we met this girl named Maura. So Maura was this girl we met. She was actually trying to be a director, and Colleen was my best friend. And so we all met, and I think Maura was like, hey, I really liked both of your work, like that you did. And I have been thinking about starting a theater company. And so there was like a light bulb moment. It was like, wait, us too. And so we cut out the dudes and we were like, what if we just did, eventually we realized, what if we did an all female theater company?
Wow.
So it was 2007. We realized, and Maura was super smart, and she realized like there aren't a lot of female directors. There aren't a lot of female playwrights that are getting highlighted. What if that became our mission? So that's what happened. That became our mission. So me and Colleen were the actors and Maura was the director. And then the three of us were equal producers. And Sweeter Theater was born.
And how do you even pay for something like that? Or did you how does that begin? Did you have to raise money?
My barista tips. No, so we're like, well, shit, we got to do something. So I can't remember if this is what we did initially. We might have just had a party initially, but we decided, it was the Pepsi challenge. Yeah. So actually Kickstarter was starting at this time. And I tried to tell Maura that we should do a Kickstarter, and she thought that it was bogus. This is a total side story, but I worked at this place called Diner as a waitress at this time. Also, I think I had gotten rid of my barista job and I was working as a server. And no joke, the general manager was like, my friend started this website called Kickstarter. You should look into it, and wrote it on a piece of paper.
Oh, wow.
That's crazy, because I should look back and see when Kickstarter started. So I tried to tell Maura, I'm like, we should do this. And she's like, that sounds bogus. Like nobody knew what Kickstarter was. I was like, no, it's real. But Maura was kind of the smarter one of all three of us. So she won. She's like, we should do the Pepsi challenge, which was this challenge where they were giving away $5,000 to like a new artistic venture. And you just had to get all these people to vote. Like you had to get 1 million votes. And somehow we won it. We won the Pepsi challenge.
Wow.
It was so hard. You had to go on every day on the site and like refresh and whatever. But we got it. It was like $5,000, which I can't believe we got it. But Maura was determined and we got it. So we had $5,000 to work with for our first show.
Seed money. Oh, for the first show.
Was for our first show.
And you did like one show, 2 shows a year? What did it look like? Just tell me about Sweeter Theater and how you felt while there and sort of now feeling more in control.
It was exciting because it was like, finally, we were in the driver's seat. Yes. It was like after going to school and having all these, teachers tell you what's what, tell you what your future is going to be, and then being lost for a year and feeling kind of pushed around and lost. Suddenly you have like a tiny amount of power because you're like, oh, wait a minute. I'm the one who's going to cast it. I'm the one who's going to hire people. Like the 3 of us are going to sit in a room and people are going to come audition for us. It was like very exciting to be in to be in that seat. And I realized I liked that a lot more than the other, you know. And we also realized that we could be more kind and we could make it more comfortable, you know, like it was exciting, not just because it was like you felt like you had a little power, but it was also like we could actually make this more pleasant for the people on the other end because we know how unpleasant it is, you know. And it was also fun to cast people and to give people jobs. So we literally, like, none of us really knew what we were doing, but we were all smart together. So we figured out, okay, the first thing we got to do is rent a space. So let's figure out if we can go negotiate a contract for like a space. So there were a lot of spaces in New York City that were renting things out. So we got a space. That was exciting. So then that determined how long our play would run. And then we're like, okay, we got to pick a play, and then we got to like cast that play, and then we got to find a scene builder, and we got to find a props person, and we got to find a music person, and we have to find a, you know, like you kind of, in a theater production, you kind of know all the pieces you need, which is great. And so that's what we did. We decided to do House of Yes. That was our first play.
And when did that come out?
Well, it's a play that had been around, and it's a movie that had been made. So it was already a script. Oh, so we did, I think it was 2007. Yeah, we did it in 2007. And we hired all those people that I just talked about, which were all of our friends. And we cast it we like put an ad out on all those publications, you know, that publication I was talking about. We put it up on the website I was talking about. And we held auditions, and we suddenly had a play, and we put it on, and we sold a bunch of tickets, and
you're feeling good.
Yes. It was awesome. Like suddenly people were posting about it on Facebook, and it was like, okay, like these ladies are going somewhere, you know, like we felt like, okay, we are taking control of our lives. But really the thing that was, now when I reflect back on it, I think it was very exciting for me to be in control somewhat, to work with other people, to be collaborative was very exciting for me. And also to be able to hire people. That was exciting to me too.
And now, okay, how many plays did you do?
We did 4.
Okay.
4 productions, 1 a year. So we continued to raise money. We did a scavenger hunt every year. So the 3 of us planned a New York City scavenger hunt, and that's how we'd raise money, which was super funny. And I remember one of the clues, or one of the things, was like you have to lick the subway pole.
Oh, no.
And take a picture of yourself doing it. I remember that was like a real winner.
Oh, God.
But we raised a lot of money, like, because people got super into it. Like, we get prizes donated, and people would sign up in teams. And I remember thinking, like, now when I look back on it, there was a lot of business going on that I really liked. And, you know, people were like, this is something that we created and we put out there, and people were following us and doing it and supporting it. And there was something kind of thrilling about that, you know, much better than that other crap I was doing, trying to look for roles, you know. So this was like exciting. Yeah.
And now I guess you're at what, like you've been in New York for 5 years. You've done 4 shows. You've had the year of kind of looking around for auditions. And what sort of, I mean, it sounds like you were in a great place. Like what led the Sweeter Theater to just sort of end?
Its demise.
Yeah, tell me about that process.
Well, it was 2007, 8, 9, 10. So I guess our last one was either in 10 or 11. If it must be that. Because I remember what happened was Colleen moved in the middle. So she actually just did the first 2 productions, and she was my best friend. And then she left New York for her man, which was really hard because she and I did a lot together, and she was a third of Sweeter Theater. So that was definitely tough because then it was me and Maura. And it was like, okay, should we keep on going? It's just the 2 of us. And we decided, yeah, like we've got something good here. People are coming to our scavenger hunts. Like, let's do it. So Maura and I continued on for 2 more years. And then after our last play, which was actually about fracturing, so funny, so sexy. Fracturing. Yeah, like fracturing, you know, like
what?
It was about, well, you don't want to know. I don't know. It's like, you know, the controversial process of fracturing, like getting water.
Fracking.
Oh my God. The name of it is called fracturing.
Got it.
That's why I said that. Fracking.
So
I hope Maura's not listening to this. Okay, so yes.
So your last play happens.
We did a play about fracking, yeah. And it was It was actually really fun. We got written up because it was controversial. We had like protesters. It was very exciting. But then Maura decided she wanted to move on. She actually decided she wanted to go on and study science. So then literally I was alone. It was just me. And so I'm thinking, okay, my best friend moved on. She moved away. She moved out of New York City, was maybe still pursuing acting, and Maura was moving on to do something else. And so it was definitely a big moment of reflection, because Sweeter Theater was something I had really held on to as like, okay, like my acting career is actually moving along because we have a theater company and we're doing something and we're putting work out there. But I think after both of them departing, I just was like, I can't do this by myself. And it was a little like deflating, you know, for sure. It was kind of like air out of the balloon. But I also think there was like a piece of relief in it, because I think I was starting to feel worn down by that identity question of like, I'm going out there and saying I'm an actor. Do I really feel like I'm an actor? Is it really fulfilling me? I feel like I'm kind of living a lie. Like I just was not feeling fulfilled. And yeah, that was kind of a hard moment for me.
How do you think that the decision to say, okay, well, I can't do this alone, I'm going to close down Sweeter Theater, like, will you walk me through that process?
Well, yeah, I think it was like it was definitely leading to a bigger question for me of like, okay, do I want to keep doing this? Do I want to keep saying I'm an actor is really what I still feel like saying. Like, I really felt like I felt like I was living a lie in a way. I knew there were so many other things I could be doing to pursue my career, to move it forward, to really commit to it. And I felt myself kind of like just getting off the gas pedal a little bit. I felt more and more discouraged to go to auditions. I was kind of leaning really hard on Sweeter Theater as the one thing that was propelling me forward. And it was really hard. I remember I wrote something either on Facebook or I wrote an email. It was something, but I did actually, when I decided to stop doing Sweeter Theater, because people were asking me like, oh, are you just going to keep doing it? And I did write some kind of letter to people saying, I'm going to take a step back from acting.
To your community, you said, hey,
Yeah.
Wow. So it's almost like a public announcement saying, hey, this didn't really pan out.
Yeah. I probably didn't. I don't think I put it on Facebook because that was probably too public for me. But I remember I did write something to a group of people that had been kind of like by my side. And yeah, it still stings, like just thinking about all of that, you know.
And how do you feel like it impacted your identity at that time? You send that email or that letter to your close people and sort of admitting, okay, I'm letting it go. It's been a good run, but it's time to move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was, yeah, I mean, it's definitely embarrassing. You know, there's a piece of it that's just, you wish it could be different. You feel kind of like silly and ridiculous that you put all of this out there and it didn't work. But there was also this feeling of like, of relief. There was a feeling of like, finally saying it is releasing me from this. Like, I gave it a good go and I tried, but I just don't want to carry that burden anymore. You know, like the burden of feeling like an imposter, like feeling like it's not real. The burden of having to go home on all my breaks and make up a story and tell people all the things I've done. Like even going out to dinner with people that weren't actors and they're always like, what are you doing now? What are you in? What do you know, like the burden of that. I didn't want to do it anymore. I just didn't. Yeah. And I still, talking about all this it's still so pride swallowing, but I don't know. The funny thing is that after I did that, I always thought I would look back. I would look at people that were successful at acting and I would be really jealous because I can get really jealous if there's something that people have that I don't have. And I always thought that's what's going to be the hardest thing. I'm never going to be able to watch another movie. I'm never going to be able to see another play. I'm never going to be able to congratulate someone else for their success in this arena because I will be so filled with envy and jealousy. And what's super weird is that I'm not. I don't feel that way I feel that way more about like people that live in New York, but I don't feel that way about acting, which is very revealing to me. I must have done the right thing. But yeah, it was definitely pride swallowing for sure.
And you're describing two feelings that seem kind of opposing, which I too can totally relate and feel that at a times of struggle when you realize, okay, this isn't working. I almost feel stuck like in mud, right? And not only do you feel embarrassed, of course, but that relief feeling you mentioned, it's sometimes hard to admit that, right? Because it feels like it's this big goal and this thing, or whether it's a business or a whole career that you're pursuing, right? And you are saying that, well, hey, I feel good that it's over, right? Of course, I feel something else that feels the absolute opposite of that, but I'm feeling them both at the same time. I mean, do you feel like as you went through the process of letting it go and saying, okay, I have to let go of Sweeter Theater, but I'm also going to let go of acting in general. How did you know that you wanted to just let that whole side of you go? Because I think a lot of times people are, they're weighing those options. They're thinking, okay, this might not be right for me, but how do I know?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I was just tired. I think I was just truly really tired. I didn't have the energy to like bullshit anymore with myself or with anyone else. Like that element of pride that had been sort of that like pride and like the worry of everyone's expectation, I think had started to be the propeller of me going forward, and that had lost its gas. It was like my pride got tired, and it was like that's when the relief came. That's, I think, what really told me that I was doing the right thing, because I was just like, I just don't have the energy anymore to keep doing this to my soul, and like I don't know. So as much as I felt so embarrassed, the relief also lent to like, okay, you don't have to be embarrassed. Like you're too tired. And I think there's also a huge relief in being honest. That was a big lesson for me. It was like I finally could breathe again when I was just truthful with myself and with other people that were on the journey with me. That was huge. Like I finally felt like I could take a breath and I could look myself in the eye. You know what I mean? Like there's something about being honest. I learned a lot about that. And I think even now, like in my business, I've taken that with me, that element of just being honest with people and yourself while you're on a journey, or at the end of it, or in the middle of it, or at the beginning of it, because that's like what has carried me through. Even that's what pushed me into the next moment, you know? And I think finally letting go of it, it was like one door closes, another one opens. I think if I don't fully close that door, I can't just linger and have it be open and wonder what's next. Closing it allowed me to like close the chapter, and then it was like, okay, what's next? And I don't think I would have ever gotten to the next place had I not just fully shut it. Yeah.
And sometimes we take a long time to shut it, like you're mentioning, because of other people's judgments, what we're worried about other people thinking. And it sounds like you sort of had that moment of just like, okay, I'm done with other people's thoughts. Like, what do I really want?
It was a lot of noise, you know, like you realize it's a lot of noise thinking about what other people think, but it's real. We do it all the time. Like anyone who says I don't care what anyone thinks, like they're bullshitting. Like there are levels of that, but I had to tire myself out so much that I finally was able to shut out that noise and get quiet. But that noise ruled me for a very long time, you know, and that wasn't the original noise. The original noise was the desire to do it, but then it became about something else. And I think that's what I realized too, is like what was originally inspiring me to like tell stories and, you know, make characters come to life, and like the enjoyment of telling a story with other people. Those are all the romantic things that come along with acting. But it was a totally different animal by the time I was done. It was about how am I going to get to the top? How am I going to stand out? How am I going to climb over other people to do it? How am I going to, act out of this desperation constantly? And it was no longer enjoyable. It was definitely, it had become something else.
To prove yourself, right?
Yes.
To others, usually in that scenario, right? So you close the door. And then...
And now we're reopening it today.
Yeah, and now we're talking about it, which is so wonderful, by the way. And I really appreciate you being so honest and open, because so many people can, I hope, feel less alone, that we are all going through this. And we've all had moments of complete and utter just fall on our face, feel like a failure, and you can get back up and show your resilience. And for you, that was a cookie company. So that's a big shift from acting to cookies. And so where did you find that courage to say, okay, this didn't work out. I'm closing that door, and I think that I want to start a cookie company. Did it go like that?
Well, I do think, and just as we're sitting here, I'm thinking, there's something very liberating about failing and telling everyone you failed, because you can only go up from there. And I realized, like, when I'm dropping myself back into that time, I mean, what more did I have to worry about? I mean, it was kind of like, well, like, this is kind of as low as I could go. I tried to be an actress. I know people judge me, for being an actress. I know people judge me because I didn't make as an actress. I'm so tired of thinking about all that. Like, well, what could go worse? Like, why don't I just take a stab at something else? And so I think that was sort of where I was at in my head. Like, after I got over the soreness of admitting that I couldn't really succeed at this thing I tried, then it was sort of after that, like, okay, well, what the hell? Like, I might as well take a shot at something else, And so I did. That was really a great time, though, because I was working as a server, so I was making money, and I realized I was, waiting more tables than I was acting. That was like another realization for me. So I just, stopped trying to do any of the acting, closed the door, and then I had a lot of time to think, and it got really quiet. That was my thing, is like, it's got to get quiet. Like, I need time to think about what really matters to me. So that's really what I was doing during that time. I was thinking about what really meant something to me. Like, whatever the next thing is I'm going to do, I know I'm going to survive because I know I can wait tables, I can make money. But like, why did I want to start acting? Like, what was it that was exciting in that beginning to me? And like, what really means something to me? So I was thinking a lot about the time I would spend with my mom back when I was a kid in Minnesota. I was thinking a lot about that because it was like a very pure time when I was like young, making meals with my family during the holidays, making cookies with my mom, like in the early morning hours. I think I was just kind of going back to all of that because I was in New York City and I was waiting tables, and it was like, I had been through all this kind of like skeevy stuff with the acting. And I think I just kind of wanted to return to something that felt pure in a way, and something that really hit my heart, like something that really felt very real to me. And that was like what kept coming up, which I know sounds kind of random, but it did. It kept coming up. And I also was like, whenever my people would come to visit me, I would take them to every bakery. Like, all I want to do is like, you got to try this cookie. You got to try this baked good. Like I was going around eating all these cookies. And I don't know, I just kept thinking, and wherever I went, I didn't see these cookies that my mom used to make. And my mom used to make these things called cinnamon thumbs. And they were tiny little hand-rolled cookies that we would make. We would roll them each one by one and press them with our thumbs. And then we would put them, my mom would literally put one cookie at a time in cinnamon and sugar. And it was kind of her signature thing. And I was looking around and I didn't see anything like that. And I knew, even just repeating it now, the sound of me saying, I think I'm going to start a cookie company. It was the same exact feeling of, I think I'm going to be an actress.
Right.
Same thing. Like, this sounds ridiculous. Everyone's going to think I have no business sense. People are going to think I'm not smart enough to do this. I don't have a culinary background. Like, I know people are going to be like, what is she doing? Why is she doing this? Like, why is she going to, now she's going to try this? Like, these are all the voices, that I am saying myself just so I don't have to hear other people saying. I'm like, I'm going to anticipate what everyone's saying about me. You know, I'm really good at that. Like,
Oh, yeah. I'm nodding my head vigorously over here. Yes, it's judgments. We always assume it's the absolute worst. And all the self-doubt. But you continued with this crazy idea.
Yeah, I remember the first person I said it out loud to was this Derek Herbster is his name. He was my boyfriend at the time. He might have been my ex-boyfriend, but he was still a friend. And I remember saying it to him, and he was in the food world. He worked for a chocolate company that was up and coming. And I said it to him, and I said, I think there's something new I want to do. And he was like, oh God, what? You know, like, and I said, I think I want to start a cookie company. And I remember him saying, oh, okay, well, that's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I was like, okay. And he was kind of a judgmental guy. And I was like, okay. That was his reaction. Like, he didn't tell me that was the worst idea ever. He didn't tell me it wasn't qualified. That was I still think about that. I don't know why, but that stuck with me. And I was like, okay, like, if that's a bad reaction, like, I could deal with that. Yeah. Like, whatever. I'm out here in New York City. I'm going to just do this.
So what did you do next? Did you start baking? Were the cookies kind of the thing that you were so good at making them already? So you just started packaging them?
Yeah, I was making them and I was bringing them to my restaurant job, and like I was friends with other like chefs and stuff, and they all really liked them. And I was like, okay. And I didn't see anything else like them. Because I remember when I was a kid, everyone loved them, but I was like, maybe it's different now. I should, do people still really like them? And everyone loved them wherever I brought them. People are like, these are so cute and they're so different. I love these. And I was like, yeah, they are really great. And I kept thinking about, this neighbor that we had that always said, where are Barb's thumbs? She always used to say, where are Barb's thumbs? Did you bring Barb's thumbs? Where are they? And it stuck with me. I was like, thumbs. And I would literally be sitting on the subway, and I was like in this daydreaming time, and I would just think about, like, I could see the word thumbs written in cursive on the subway. And I thought about purple because my mom, a lot of this started to become an homage to my mom, who is still with us, but she's a very important person in my life. And she had this purple raincoat she always used to wear, and her favorite color is purple. And I just literally was getting this vision of like thumbs written in cursive and purple. And I was like, I think that'd be the logo. I don't know. And then I was like, okay, like, what if I figured out how to make a logo? What if I could make a tag? What if I could just like make them out of my apartment and put them in a bag and make a label? What if I could do that? And this woman who was my neighbor, I knew she was a graphic designer, and I told her the story of like how my mom used to make these, and she had like a tear in her eye. And I was like, okay, she's got a tear in her eye. Like, I guess this is actually resonating with her. I didn't even realize that story would resonate with anybody, but I was like, that's interesting. And she was like, I am going to help you. I am going to make a tag for you, and I'm going to charge you $300, and you can pay it over time. Oh. That was like my first expense. Was my $300 for my branding.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And then did you get it into stores? And you obviously started in New York.
She made me this tag, and it had my family on it because she's like, this is your story. And so anyways, this is your story. And she was like, the story is what's going to help sell it. And she kind of taught me about like the importance of the story and what I was doing. And then, she made this tag for me, and I went and got it printed, and I tied it on with a ribbon to these little packages. And I would literally walk into stores like that sold little goods, and I was like, hi, I make these. Do you think you'd want to sell them? And they would just be like, well, how much is a case? And I'd be like, what's a case?
I'll figure it out as I go.
Yeah, and I was buying flour and sugar from across the street at the grocery store. Like, I was buying everything retail. I had my dad would always be like, how much is it costing? I'm like, oh, it doesn't matter. Like, let's just see if people want them, And so that's kind of like literally, that's how it started. I put them in a bag, tie them with a ribbon, put the tag on, and then go see if people want to buy them.
The start of Thumbs.
Yeah.
Well, so now, I mean, you've had your business for how many years? Thumbs.
So I really started out in my kitchen in like 2011. And then 2012 is when I like declared it a business. So really 2012 is when I started. And I really was just making them out of my Brooklyn kitchen. My roommate wanted to kill me. But I had like a big thing of flour and a big thing of sugar.
So where is Robyn Frank now? And what are you dreaming big about?
Well, I now have 4 part-time employees, which is very exciting. And we are selling nationwide. And it's very exciting when a stranger comes up and says, Thumbs Cookies, and they don't know me, they don't know how it started, and they say they like them. To me, that's like a huge moment of victory. And I have a very long way to go. Like, I have moved very slowly building this business, and I have a lot to learn, and I'm excited by growing it little by little every year. I've always wanted to have a full-on cookie mobile food truck type situation. So that is something that I'm really trying to do. That's something I've actually tried and failed at. But as I've learned, failure is just like another step in the process. So I'm starting to try to make my cookie mobile for next year and eventually probably have some kind of storefront.
Awesome.
Yes.
And the last question.
Yeah.
So, as we know, hindsight is everything.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing what you know now, where you are now, what advice would you have given to the younger version of yourself when you were going through that time of big change and just admitting that I need to let this go? This isn't working for me and I'm going to leave it behind. And it probably felt like the end of the world. What advice would you give yourself during that moment?
I didn't realize that failure was such a necessary part of life. Like, I did not realize that it was really just a step to the next thing. I thought it was the end, like you really think it's the end. Like, you never think about what's past failure. You always just think about the fact that failure is the period, the end of the sentence. And now that I've failed so many times, I realize it's really just the difference between maybe me and someone who hasn't done the things that maybe I've pursued or whatever. Someone pointed this out to me. It's just the fact that, like, I just literally picked myself up and kept on going after that period, the end. It wasn't a period. It was literally just like another part of the sentence. And I think I would have said, if you want to make your mark, if you want to make anything of your life, you have to be willing to fuck up like royally and have the stamina to literally wake up the next day and face your truth and face everybody and embrace the fact that it didn't work, but know that you have what it takes to just wake up and keep on going and doing the next thing. Like, you just have to keep going no matter what anyone says. You just have to keep going.
I love it. Robyn Frank, thank you so much. This was so fun. So good to talk really with you.
Thanks for listening to my crazy story.
Did you notice Robyn talked about how important the label of actor was for her? When Robyn decided that being an actor wasn't her goal anymore, and it was time to lay that identity down, it was difficult because that label, it took time to build. And it's much easier to keep up with appearances than to put ourselves out there again and to just start over with a new identity. A lot of the times, a title is taken away. Maybe we lose a job, circumstances force us to change our direction, but it's a unique privilege to truly choose to take on a new title. In Robyn's case, she made that choice, the dramatic shift from actor to baker. And she knew that it was the right decision for her. She could have kept doing the theater company with somebody else, but it wasn't what she wanted anymore. And it's ironic because for a long time, Robyn was mustering up the courage to own that label of actor. She talked about going home at holidays and thinking ahead, what she was going to say at parties. And she described it as feeling fraudulent. So to admit defeat now, admit that label wasn't her anymore, when it now had weight and value, well, that was hard. So, today's resource, it will be linked in the show notes. It's a book by Lou Blazer. It's called Break Free, The Courage to Reinvent Yourself and Your Career. He is a career change advisor who's been in the business for over 20 years. And in the book, he addresses the real issues that stop us from committing to a change in direction to pursue our career goals. And with Robyn, her confidence in changing courses from acting to cookies was clear in the interview. It felt like a no-brainer for her, and we can all learn something from that. It took courage to put away one identity that took time to build and roll the dice on something new. That's inspiring. And I'm so glad her tiny cookies are in the world now for us all to enjoy. Thank you so much for listening to So Fail, So Good. If you want to know more about the show or today's guest, visit sofailsogood.com. This is a Matriarch Digital Media production. Executive producer Twyla Dang. If you want to know more about Matriarch or other podcasts on the network, head to matriarchdm.com.